act very well.
We have the honor of having our chair speak to us tonight. Mr. Dennis Peters, I call him Denny. I don't know what you prefer.
I go by Denny.
Okay,
Dennis is too formal.
Denny has 40 years of experience in aerospace, so he started when he was 6 years old. And, I think he was picking the weeds in the back and he's counting that as aerospace.
Paper gliders.
He is also one of our few certified software quality engineers. Are there any other Oh, wow, we have a lot. We don't have that many in the section, really. Not at all.
But we're all here tonight.
He's not here tonight. He's not going to talk anything about software quality, so that's probably a good thing, because if he was, none of us would be interested. I shouldn't say that. Danny's going to talk about counterfeit parts. And those of you in Federal and Department of Energy have heard counterfeit parts with respect to bolts primarily, and circuit breakers are the two things I think of when I hear.
Body armor.
Body armor too?
Really? Body armor too?
Joe over here, he's a quality engineer by day, but he's a reserve officer with APD on the weekend, so he knows about body armor as well. If you ever get pulled over for running a red light now that the cameras are gone, it's probably Joe doing this. Flash your hands too hard, you probably get out. I'm a member. It's one of my member benefits.
Joe's our inside.
Danny is also a certified quality engineer as well. What others? Quality manager. And do you have the CQ? Are you a certified quality engineer as well? You'll be taking that exam in the spring. Is that right? Let's welcome Danny.
Welcome our chair.
As Don had stated, when I first heard about counterfeit parts, most of what I heard about was fasteners. Bolts, nuts, rivets. Boeing used to have a problem with getting rivets that weren't made of the right material. It's hard to tell with a rivet whether it's got the right material or not, unless you take it to some metallurgist and they start doing the analysis on it, then you find out. And I found out that bolts have a code on the top.
Yeah.
I haven't found out how to read it yet, but they have a code on the top that tells you whether it's fake or not. I have a guy that I worked with suspected some counterfeit parts, and him and a government investigator went to this facility up in Espanola. They went up there to find out what was going on. Well, it was supposed to be a surprise visit, but evidently the guy got warned by somebody. It was an insider thing. You know, we had a dirty Fed worker. My God. Anyhow, they got up there and they weren't finding anything. The government guy was a big smoker. So they're around on the back dock smoking, and they're standing there talking. Look down and what's that? They found one of the counterfeit bolts. So they started digging around, and they found more. They buried them in the back lot. That's why they couldn't find them.
Oh.
And then, now it's expanded. Now the big business is in the electronics industry. I remember an engineer that worked with me said to me one day, he said, "Denny, why the heck would somebody go to all this trouble to do this?" Didn't you, John?
Yes, I did.
And I said, because it is a $1 billion a year business. Imagine that. $1 billion a year business. So, the DOD, the DOE, and NASA are getting real excited about counterfeit parts. And it's really critical when you have safety critical items. You know, things like an F-16, it loses electrical power. It's a rock. It comes down. There is no glide path in an F-16. So you really don't want parts that are not up to standard in those aircraft. So the government is getting real excited, and a little later on I'll talk to you about some of the things that our Congress is doing for us on this effort. I borrowed this presentation from NASA because I'm an engineer and I basically look for the easiest way to do things. Counterfeit electronic parts. This is one of the things that you look at, some of the telltale signs that you may have a counterfeit part. If you look over here, you can see these look like they were used. You can see there's solder on them, and there's defects here where the actual plating and everything have been changed by the soldering process. The other thing is to look at die markings and part numbering and remarking, retopping. They call it black topping. Basically what they do is they cover the part with a black covering and then remark it to whatever they decide they want to sell you that day. So it's and these people are pretty ingenious sometimes. Sometimes they're not too bright. So you got retop parts or remarked. And a lot of these parts, believe it or not, come off of scrap boards. And we'll get into that a little bit later.
Now, Danny,
Yes, sir.
the lower left-hand one, that's a fur brown part. See the lower retopping?
Yeah.
So you're saying they got a chip from somewhere else and they just put that company's
Yep.
logo on it?
Yep.
Actually, in the last few years, it's gotten a lot more sophisticated than that. They actually take a layer off the top and then they use the same material back onto it. They've developed that technology for black topping.
So how do you know that they're counterfeit?
That is a very, very interesting question.
There are several ways that you can get to that. Part of it is you can look, and a lot of times you can see that they've been blacktopped. And you can do a, they used to do an acetone test, and the first time they started blacktopping, the material they used would be dissolved by acetone. Well, they're getting a little bit smarter. They found out they're doing that, so they're using a tougher coating to blacktop it. So now you got to go to more like a toluene or something like that, something that's a little bit more corrosive and more powerful to go ahead and check for blacktopping. So as we come up with the ways to catch them, they keep coming up with ways. It's kind of like counterfeiting dollar bills. You know, they keep trying to make the perfect counterfeit dollar.
I got a few of those tonight when people were paying.
Yeah, all those 20s. You notice that?
The ink was smearing on them.
Probably Tom.
Yeah.
Here's some more. Here you can see, this one is a good example of, this is a new lead versus a used lead. And you can see the difference there. So that's one of the telltale signs that you can look for. You can see the dual marking on this one. And this one is a little bit more subtle. You got to look at, and I have some examples that I saw in one of our investigations later. But you can see the dash dots here, that National doesn't use that. That's not part of their part numbering system. So you gotta, that's some of the things that, and the problem with counterfeiting is to catch it, you gotta have somebody that's experienced in component engineering and components. They got to understand what part marking is, what the materials are supposed to be. So it's not something that you can give an inspector and say, hey, they're going to go out and find counterfeit parts. You're going to have to train them and so they understand what it should be, so they can find the telltale signs, because the counterfeiters are getting more and more subtle. And it used to be they didn't even use the right part. You would get a counterfeit part, and it literally wasn't even what you thought it was. It was really easy with the bolts and fasteners, because most times the difference between bolts and fasteners was hardness. And how many have a Rockwell hardness tester available all the time? Yeah. Oh, you do? Yeah. So it was easy. and you weren't even getting the part. At least in some of the electronics